Thank you, His Excellency, for granting us this interview. Allow me to start with the British-Burma relationship. So, in your opinion, what are the key elements of a British engagement with Burma?
Well, first of all, thank you for giving me this chance to talk to you and to your readers and viewers.
Yeah.
I think the key elements of Britain's relationship with this country goes back a long way, and there have been a lot of difficult things in that relationship, and I think more recently a lot of very positive things. And at the moment, our engagement is mainly about supporting the reform process here, supporting the peace process, and obviously helping people address the situation in Rakhine. So those are the main things that we do as part of the relationship. There are lots of other things that people-to-people contacts, education is a very big element of what people in this country see as important about the UK. And of course we also have the trade relationship, which is growing, still very small, but is growing.
You were the very keen observer of November elections. So what do you think of the result of the election in November?
Well, I think given the circumstances, given that this country hadn't had a proper election for over 50 years, they were remarkably good. Of course they weren't perfect, and the observers from the EU and elsewhere made clear what the deficiencies were, but given where we started from, they really were remarkably good, and I think it's a great tribute to the people of this country and to the Election Commission that they turned out as they did.
So in your opinion, what could be the lessons that Myanmar could learn from the November elections for future elections?
Well, that's for the election experts to look at, but one obvious one is that the process for registering to get onto the voters list was rather complicated. There were a lot of problems about that last summer, as you remember, and I think in future a system which allows people to register to vote in an easier way so that fewer people are left off the list, I think that's clearly a very important part of what needs to change. And then obviously we've got the wider issues of the fact that only 75% of the parliament is elected and 25% is appointed. Those kind of issues, which are bigger than the election, are still very important issues that need to be addressed.
We will have a new government led by National League for Democracy very soon. So, in your opinion, what are or what can be the hurdles for the new government in this transition?
Well, I think it's going to be a very tricky time. I think everybody recognises that. I think we all need to be patient and understand that it's going to take time to change a country after 50 years of military rule. Of course it's going to take time. And the military are still very much going to be part of the government. We all know that. Our hope is that the NLD and the military can find a way of working together, which is why the talks that are happening at the moment between Dr. Aung San Suu Kyi and the Commander-in-Chief are so important. But if they can work together, then I think there's a chance for great progress with the new government. I've been very impressed. I was in Naypyidaw last week observing the UNDP's induction course for MPs, and we also had a reception for the female MPs who've been elected to Parliament, and I was very impressed by the energy and the expertise of many of those women MPs. So I think there's a huge amount of goodwill, there's a huge amount of talent, and so I'm quite optimistic about the future, but of course it won't be entirely smooth.
You mentioned about the military. It appears that Britain has now, the British government now has a cordial relationship with Myanmar military. What are you doing now with the Myanmar military? What kinds of programs you are engaging with? And how do you see the role of military in the Myanmar's transition?
Well, the military has a very important role in the country because of what the Constitution says, but actually in any country the military has a very important role. The issue is not whether or not the military should have an important role, it's the relationship of the military to an elected civilian government. So what we've been doing is talking to the Burmese military about what that's like, how an army can be popular and strong and respected, but part of a civilian-led government. So they don't need to lead the government, they can follow a civilian administration. So the kinds of things we've been doing is courses which talk about the role of the armed forces in a democracy, issues of international law, issues around how you manage a military transition, those kind of things which are very useful for them as they think about the modernization of the military. And then in due course, I hope, as the political process continues, as things become more normal here, we can also build up that relationship to look at the more traditional sort of aspects of a military-to-military relationship, which is more training around military issues. We're not doing that at all at the moment. It's all about human rights and democracy. It's not about sort of military training. But in the future, that might happen if the reform process continues, and if the civilian government wants that to happen. Of course, that will be a very powerful signal to us all.
What is the policy of arms sales to Burma?
Well, at the moment, there's an EU arms embargo. It's very clear. None of the EU are allowed to sell arms which could be used offensively in a conflict to Burma. And as far as I know, no European country has. We, the UK, certainly haven't.
Yeah. Are you, when engaging with Myanmar military, are you also working sort of in a coordination with other countries, like for example with the United States?
Well, we talk very closely, of course, here with other countries. And generally we're all all working towards the same goals. So we think that if you engage with the military here, you talk to them, you take them out of the country, you show them things in other parts of the world, in South America or South Africa or other countries that have been through a transition. If you can show them this, it helps them to understand the context for the transition happening here, and I hope gives a better chance that the transition here will be smooth.
Burma has a very long history with Britain. I mean, we were under British colony for years. And what do you think of reconciliation, especially ethnic reconciliation in Burma, and how Burma could be strengthen this reconciliation, in your opinion?
Well, I think this is one of the most important issues that the new government has to face, which is how to deal with reconciliation, how to deal with both, of course, in terms of the history of the country in the mainland, as it were, but also, of course, in terms of the peace process and the future for the ethnic areas. This is the most important issue. I think we, as an outsider, we can't dictate how that needs to happen, but the process needs to have broad support, and of course it needs to make the ethnic groups feel, all ethnic groups, including of course the Bamar, feel that they have a respected role within the country, that their interests are taken account of, that their voice is heard, their culture is respected, their language is respected. All of these things are very, very important. And from my conversations with Aung San Suu Kyi, I think she very much understands this, and we're all looking forward to seeing exactly how the new government is going to approach that issue.
For the last 4 years or 5 years, there has been a peace process, as we all know, going on. Was there any role the British government has been engaging both with the Burmese government and also ethnic groups in the peace process that has been going on for the last 4 or 5 years?
Well, none of the international community has been playing a mediation role. So we've not been sort of getting in the middle between the government and the ethnic groups, but we have been playing a supportive role. So we and others have spent a lot of time talking to the ethnic groups, talking to the Myanmar Peace Centre, talking to the army about how they see the peace process. And of course we've also been providing financial support to that. And I think the peace process is in a very delicate phase. It's quite clear the situation in northern Shan State is very concerning, a lot of people displaced, and it's very important that that conflict is brought to an end as quickly as possible and that full humanitarian access is given.
Yeah. MIZIMA has been monitoring the visit of the delegations, foreign delegations to Burma, Myanmar, and we noticed that former Prime Minister Tony Blair has been to the country for a number of times, meeting both with the government and Nationally for Democracy. What can you tell us about the visits?
Well, of course, Tony Blair is a former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's not connected to the current government. So in fact, he visits independently of the embassy. He tells us when he's coming, of course, but we don't get involved in his visits. So I'm afraid I can't tell you the content of his visits, you'll need to ask him about that.
I'd like to touch the issue of business and trade between the two countries. It appears that there has not been much British investors coming to the country in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm aware that there is a British Burma Business Chamber already set up, but what do you think? Why there is not much the British investors coming to Burma?
Well, I think foreign investment across the board, apart from Japan and China and some other countries in the region, has so far been quite low. Obviously, Telenor and Ooredoo have come in; they're very big. Actually, British investment may become very large because if there are gas reserves found off the coast of Rakhine, Shell is one of the companies with a very large number of blocks down there, and if they find gas, of course, they will become one of the biggest investors in the country. But we won't know that for some years. I think it's an issue of, there are certain challenges in this country when it comes to business. There's a challenge around infrastructure, there's a challenge around the legal system, education, lots of things that when you talk to businessmen they're concerned about. And of course until recently, we've had this political challenge. People really didn't know what was going to happen. Would the transition go smoothly? It looks like the transition will go smoothly, and I think what we will see after April is a lot of renewed interest from international business, including British business, about the country, and I think we will see more investors coming in. We do have some big British companies here. Unilever has a factory here, a number of others. We've got a lot of British law firms have come in and are working here. So there is a British presence, and I'm very pleased also that there are a couple of British schools that are coming in, and I think will make a big impact.
Yeah. What about the issue of investment protection agreement or MOU between the two countries? I'm aware that there is a draft already, the agreement, investment and protection agreement with EU, between EU and Burma. But how about the bilateral protection agreement?
Well, in the case of the UK, we would be covered by the agreement with the EU, and that's not finalised yet. They're still negotiating it. But if they reach agreement between the EU and Burma about investment protection, we would enjoy protection because we're part of the EU. So we would be covered by that. I think that is one of the issues. I think one of the other issues is arbitration. The New York Convention which is the convention which allows trade disputes to be arbitrated by an international court. Burma has signed that convention. They've, I think, just passed the legislation, but of course there needs to be training here to ensure that it can be implemented. When that's fully implemented, that also will be a very positive sign for business.
Are you optimistic with the change of the new government now that just for political reasons there could be more interest from the British business and investors coming to Burma in next 3-4 years?
Absolutely. I'm sure there will be more interest. I think we'll see a huge number of British companies coming to Burma after April and having a looking at the prospects. And there are a lot of opportunities, and our message to them is that it's a place that's well worth coming to visit. And although there may be some aspects of doing business here which are difficult, that's true in almost every country in this region, and they should come in because there are fantastic opportunities.
Yeah. I'd like to ask about the development aid. A lot of development projects and aid you have been providing to Burma in the recent years. Can you tell us more about what are they and how you like to continue these programs in the country?
Well, we have one of the things that the reform process has allowed us to do is to increase our aid to this country enormously. So we are now the second largest bilateral donor. Obviously Japan is much, much bigger, but we're the second biggest bilateral donor. And we have a budget of around $140 million a year, depends on the exchange rate. That's spent on a number of areas. There's a lot of expenditure in health. So we work with something called the 3MDG Fund, and that's helping to reduce the number of mothers who die during childbirth. It's helping to address tuberculosis, and it's helping to address HIV/AIDS. And it works particularly in the rural areas. So it's working in these very remote places where there may not be a doctor, just a midwife, a very basic clinic. So that's one area that we work in. Another big area we work in is in agricultural development. So about how do you help farmers in the rural areas improve their livelihoods, or how do you help them leave farming and go and do something else? And we've got a very big program in that area. And then we do have some programs in education. We've got a program which has got two English-speaking teachers in every single education teacher training college in the country. So that's a very important program. And we also have some programs which are helping develop the private sector. And actually that's going to be a bigger feature in future. We probably will have some changes once the new government comes in, because obviously we have to listen to what their priorities are. We don't tell them what their priorities are, they tell us. And we may also see some changes in the size of the program, though we'll announce that when the time comes.
Mm-hmm. How about the programs, and especially development projects in the areas where conflicts and tensions are still there?
Well, we're part of something called the Joint Peace Fund, which has been set up with a number of countries, including the European Union, the United States, Denmark. A number of countries have contributed to this fund. And the aim of that fund is to support the peace process and also to support projects in conflict areas which support the peace process. Now, of course, we have to be very careful about how we do development in those conflict areas, because some of the ethnic groups see development as something that's imposed on them by the government in Naypyidaw, whereas, of course, it's very, very important that development in those areas is something which they're consulted about and which they feel they can support. So it's quite a tricky area. You have to approach it very carefully, but we are very much involved.
Yeah. You have been quite actively engaged with the civil society groups in the country in different sectors. How do you see the role of or the work of the civil society groups in the country, especially in the last 5 years?
Well, one of the things I was amazed by when I came here was just how strong civil society was. I mean, given the country's history and the fact that civil society was oppressed for so many years, it made a huge impression when I came here and found just how vibrant and energetic civil society was. And I hope that will continue, because I think they play an enormous part in any country in ensuring that what the government does reflects popular concerns. So I very much hope that will continue. Of course, there's been a big change, because a lot of those civil society leaders are now in Parliament, and so there's going to be a bit of a rearrangement, and no doubt the relationship between civil society and the new government will be a bit different from the one with the last government, but civil society has a hugely important role to play.
I'd like to go into a little personal question. You have been really visiting around the country. I noticed that you have been with the rickshaw drivers together. You have been going around the market. What are the highlights, or what are the sort of exciting moments for you all these years as an ambassador here?
There are so many. Most recently, I did a fantastic journey. I was up in Loiko, and I happened to be there on the National Day, so I got to go to their celebrations, and of course I was nobody knew who I was, but everybody saw that I was enormously tall, so almost everybody wanted a photograph with me just because I was very tall. And then I took the train from there to Kalor, which is a fantastic journey. I recommend it, and it was fantastic because you get to talk to the people on the carriage, and they were so welcoming and friendly, and we just chatted about life, and it was absolutely fantastic. As an ambassador, I think there's a great danger that you get trapped in this circle of Rangoon and Naypyidaw, and you see the same people, and you really don't understand the country. You've got to get out there and meet ordinary people if you want to understand the country, and I try to do that whenever I can.
So what did you feel when you were, for example, in a market in Basondao, you were trying to buy fish there some days ago, and when you visited a refugee camp in Kachin State, what did you feel?
Well, first of all, that people are very welcoming here. I mean, you get no sense of resentment, or when you go to the market, everyone's very welcoming, very keen to talk to you, very surprised that I speak Burmese. That always causes a laugh, and I find that wonderful. It's perfectly friendly. Then you go to the camps, and you see people who are just as friendly and welcoming, but they have almost nothing. They're living in very cramped conditions. They don't have enough food. They don't have access to education hospitals often, and all they want to do is go back to their homes and start life again, and it's terrible that they're not able to do so at the moment.
Yeah. Just one question. So, what are your expectations for those whatever time you are going to be in the country as an ambassador?
Well, I have hopes. My hope is that when I leave, which will probably be next summer, so in a year and a half's time, I hope we will be firmly on the road to democracy, that the transition will be continuing to go smoothly, that we will see the beginnings of change in terms of the lives of people in this country. Of course, it'll take time. I mean, I think there are people who think that things will change very, very quickly after April, and of course that isn't the case. I mean, some things will, but usually to change a country takes many, many years, and we must all be very patient. But in a year and a half's time, I hope we'll see the beginnings of that, and we'll see that the country is on the road to a better future.
Yeah. I noticed there was a visit of a member of parliament who has a Burmese heritage, Boss Colley. He's a co-chair of the all-party parliamentary group to Burma just a few days ago. And how do you see this kind of visit especially between the parliament in Britain and the parliament in this country, and also regional parliaments in Burma?
Well, I think that's part of the people-to-people contacts which are so important, and which of course have been very much reduced over the past few decades, but are now flowering again. So I hope we will see many more people come from the UK, not just people who've got a link to Burma, but other people from Parliament, from business, from the universities. I hope they will come. I hope they'll see the situation. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the situation here in the outside world, and so I encourage everybody who can to come here and see the situation for themselves, and they can then understand just how much the situation has changed, just how much the country has changed.
How about British tourists coming to Burma?
Well, we're seeing more British tourists every year. I hope we will continue to see more British tourists coming every year. It's a fantastic country to visit. I think it's the best country to visit in Southeast Asia, perhaps in the world. And you have some wonderful sites, you have some wonderful hotels, and the main thing is the people here are so welcoming. Nobody who comes here, everybody who comes here goes away with such a warm impression of the people of this country.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to say to the viewers and readers?
Jesu di mare.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for giving this interview, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.